you repeatedly facing objections? Have you tried different approaches to overcoming objections and just found that you're not seeing the impact that you'd like? Look, whether you're new to sales or you've been in sales for some time, objections are a normal part of the process. And some of the objection training that's out there, the tips, strategies, they're not always effective, especially with today's buyers who are a lot more complex, right? They've done their research, they're very fixated on what else is in the market, which can make things a lot more difficult. So a strategy to overcome objections that was working 15 years ago may not be so effective in today's environment. Fortunately, there is a strategy I've found working with all sorts of sales professionals and sales leaders around the world that is effective. I call it the pushback, pause, and propel method to overcome objections, and that's what we're going to go through in today's video. Hi, I'm Shawn Casemore, and I help you learn how to be a top performing sales professional so that you can earn more in less time. If that sounds good to you, and I'm not sure why it wouldn't, then make sure you click the subscribe button and you'll be notified each and every time I release a new video. If you've got strategies that have worked for you on dealing with objections, make sure you comment below. And if you like this video on objections, click the like button. That tells me you want more videos on dealing with objections. Now, let's get into it. Let's start with mindset. When it comes to objections, we can often be a little bit taken back. Right? Somebody shares an objection that you may not expect, and you go, oh wow, I thought we were doing well here, and suddenly we're not, right? So objections can play a little bit of a mind game with sales professionals. Now, if you've been around for a while, you've been selling what you've been selling for some time, you've probably heard most of the objections that are out there, but they can still throw us off. So step one is mindset. Realize that an objection, presuming the buyer is still on the phone, or they're still in the Zoom meeting, or they haven't left the room, they're still interested, right? So an objection is not really a, hey, get out, I want nothing to do with you. It's more a matter of saying, I've got a question, or I've got a concern, or something has come up. I need you to explain or help me understand why that's not an issue. That's really what an objection is. And once you realize that, we can tend to calm down, which means we're in a better state of mind when it comes to dealing with objections, which is the fundamental, the foundation to being able to use the pushback, pause, and propel method. So step one, mindset. An objection is simply a, hey, help me understand this question, this issue, this concern that I have. That's all it is. Don't panic, stay in it. Let's keep going. So then here is the pushback, pause, and propel method to dealing with objections. Pushback. Pushback is simply taking the objection that was shared with you and pushing back a bit on it. Challenging the buyer a bit, not offending them, not being insulting. You're not going to stand up and pound your fist on the table. You're just going to push back a bit on what they say, and you're going to pause. You want to look for a reaction from them because that's going to tell you which way to go next. The propel is using a transitional statement that moves the conversation back in the direction you want it to go. Okay? So let me give you an example of this. Let's suppose you're trying to sell a piece of equipment and it's expensive. Okay, you know you've got a pretty high price here, and you've got good justification for that higher price. Good quality, been around a while, whatever the case might be. So your buyer says to you some point during your conversations, presuming these aren't early, but they're maybe later in the conversation, they say, you know what, unfortunately, the cost of your equipment is just too high. I can get the same thing from company A, and it's like 20% less. Okay, so again, I'm making this up, but there's an example. Here is the pushback, pause, and propel method, or response, if you will, to that objection. I'd say, so you can get it for 20% less? I'd like to see that quote. In all honesty, I know my competitors well, and yeah, we are the more higher priced in the market for good reason, but there's not a 20% difference. Now, what I would suggest we do then is talk a little bit about why we are the higher priced option in the market, because there's a lot more value in the features, the benefits, etc., that you would get from our equipment. Are you okay if we work through some of those differences? You see what happened there? So I pushed back on what they said, challenged them a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit, then I paused. That's their chance to say something. You might find they say nothing. They may go, well, right? That's typically the response you'll get. Oh, well, right? They don't know what to say next because you just called them on what might have been a bluff or what might have been something that they threw out not really having anything to back it up. Let's be honest, the price objection is often something that people just throw out to either try and get you out of the office or to try and get a deal, right? They don't always have facts to back it up. Now, you're not going to push back with anything that's untrue. If the difference in price was 20%, you wouldn't say, oh, we're not 20% more. You wouldn't do that, right? That's a lie. We're not here to lie. But you would push back, particularly if their objection is unwarranted, okay? Let's use a different example just to show you again how this works. So let's say for a moment that you're selling financial investments. You're selling those to banks. So you're meeting with a gentleman at a bank, you're talking about the investment portfolio that you have that you think they should bring in and provide to their clients. And let's say the banker says to you after a few minutes of listening, or maybe you've gone through several meetings, they say, you know what, I can appreciate that, but you know the returns that these are generating just don't match the returns of the current products that we're offering our customers. So how can I offer your product when it's not generating the same returns? Now, let me jump in here for a moment. Let's assume that some of your products aren't generating the same returns, but some are generating as good or better returns. That's usually the case. Here's the pushback, pause, and propel method. I would say, well, I would agree with you. There are some funds that aren't necessarily performing as some of the funds that you're currently sharing are, but many of them are outperforming your current funds. And most importantly, as the market changes, we see even those that are lower performing exceeding the current results that you're getting with the funds you're offering your clients. Now that said, if you'd like to work through and look at each of the funds that I'm suggesting and how they compare and actually dominate over the current products you're selling, I'm happy to walk through that with you. Are you okay if we just pick a few of those and start there to see what happens? So that is the pushback, pause, and propel method. Now again, notice the pause is fairly significant. You're kind of doing a count to 5, right? 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3. The goal is to get them to say something. Because if they share an example, well, this fund here doesn't match this fund. This is way outperforming the one you're suggesting. I can say, okay, in that fund, that may be the case, but we believe long-term that's going to change. Here's why. Now let's talk about the other 8 funds that are actually dominating over all of your other funds. So it gives me a chance to respond. So the pause is to flush out further objections, or where they just go, okay, right? And we move forward. The propel is the statement, the transitional statement that moves us from where we're at to where we want to go. Okay? So push back, pause, propel method to dealing with objections. Try it out. You have to have some confidence here. And remember, pushback is not being insulting. We're still being respectful of what the person says. You really have to choose your language wisely. So you might want to try this out in a peer first, but it can be very, very powerful. You know why? Because buyers today are looking for people they can trust. And when you push back, as long as it's factual and it's real, you're not making stuff up, suddenly you start to gain their confidence and you don't look like the other person that's just trying to sell stuff. Let's talk about next steps. Next steps, if you've practiced this, you've applied this, you've seen how it works, I've given you some different examples. One thing I want to mention about the pause, I call it the power pause. The power pause is something you can use at any time in your sales process. Use it for a chance to flush out further objections, to flush out further questions. Use it for a chance to give yourself time to think. If somebody shares something with you, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm not sure how to respond to that. It's okay to pause. Pausing places you in the power position. You see, right now you're watching this video. And if I was to pause, notice I didn't break eye contact. I'm still looking at that little camera right here. When I'm to do that, most people start to think, what's going on here? Why are they not saying anything, right? Catches you a little bit off guard. Now, in reality, in my mind, I might be going, okay, hold on. What's the next step? What's the next thing to say? How should I best respond? What is my propel statement going to be? That's what you're thinking about during that pause, right? What am I going to say next? But the pause really creates dramatic effect. It creates emotion, and we know that emotion helps people convert, right? It helps them transition from not wanting to buy to buying. So use a pause at any time. It's part of this process I'm giving you, but you can use it at any time. Just don't pause and start staring at the ceiling, obviously, but use it. You can count to 3, give yourself a moment, give yourself a break, take a second, and then move forward. It actually places the power with you versus the prospect. Now, the last thing I want to mention here is propelling the conversation forward. As I said in the last little segment, I want you to use the pause to think about the wording or language you're going to use to mention next. How are you going to propel this to the next step? But often that next step is really going back to addressing what their objection is. but it's doing so in a manner that keeps the conversation going. So rather than go back and say, oh, well, we're the higher priced equipment in the market. You're right about that. I don't know if it's 20% or not. I don't know if that's really fair. You see that, right? I'm just reliving this objection, and if anything, I'm convincing you you're right. I don't want to do that. That's why this approach is so powerful. The propel section after the pause, and I've thought about what I'm going to say next, then I say it, that propel, that transitional statement is designed to say, let me show you why your objection is not necessarily true, or why it's unfounded based on other information I have. That's what you're doing. So you're not challenging them, you're proving to them why that objection really isn't relevant, and you're moving that conversation forward. That's what Propel is all about. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'd suggest you try this out. Try the pushback, pause, and propel method to dealing with objections. Practice them first, get good at them, watch your language, be respectful. We're pushing back in a way that pushes back respectfully, but that suggests that we're still in the driver's seat here, because you are. You're the expert in what you sell, not the person you're selling to. So I hope you've enjoyed this. If you'd like to watch more of my sales training videos, you can check more of those out here, over here. And if you've liked this video, click the like button. And as I mentioned before, click subscribe. You'll be notified every time I release a new video just like this. And comment below if you've got other strategies you use to effectively deal with objections. Till next time, let's get out there and go sell something and deal with those objections. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.